Good morning, everybody. So welcome on this beautiful fall day to all of you here in the sanctuary and to those of you on Zoom, to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northern Nevada, where it is our mission to grow together in love, faith, justice, and joy. So I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, that we sit on the ancestral lands of the Paiute, Shoshone, and Washoe peoples. My name is Dave Bianchi, and I'm serving as your worship associate today. Now, if you're new to us, know that we are a welcoming community, and we care deeply for all people, regardless of racial identity, age, economic circumstances, immigration status, sexual orientation, or gender identity. For those of you on Zoom, you'll remain muted during the service, but we welcome your comments in the chat box, and you can stay on and visit with one another following the service. Now, if you have a joy or a concern today that you would like to share with the fellowship, please fill out this information sheet that's in the seat pocket in front of you or in the back of the room, and then hand those to either Chris or to me during our greeting time, and we'll make sure we share those with everyone later in the service. So thank you for being with us today. We have a couple of announcements. First of all, if you notice, there's a little tables out in the gathering room with all kinds of food stuff. Well, what that's for is the Renal Posse, which help feed our unhoused folks in our community. And the whole idea is to pick some of that up and help prepare those foods and bring them back at a designated time. There's instructions that go with that. And then I think there's an announcement from Lois. Come on up, Lois.
Well, most of you know we are going to celebrate our 65th anniversary for UUFNN on November 16th, and it's going to be a family fun fair for all of us. And the RSVP sign up is out in the gathering room. So please just sign your name and said you're going to be here so we can count on you. And I also have a sign up sheet for help. We need help. We need people who will come and help set up tables. We need people who will bring food. We need people who's going to help with the kids' activities. And greeters, we have some out-of-town people that are going to be coming. We want to be sure and greet them. And some parking guides. Our fellowship members are going to park in the parking lot on the other side of our campus. And then we're going to let our guests park inside our campus. So we'll need people to help shuffle those kinds of people. And we need people, just helping us clean up afterwards. So please look for our sign-up sheet and come and have fun. This is a great celebration, so thank you.
Yes, the sooner you sign up, the sooner she'll start getting some proper sleep. So we're looking forward to that. Now, Brad, I think you have something to share with us about climate.
That's about the extent of my musical capabilities. And I'm afraid I'd probably screw that up. Poetry and dancing is more my thing. Climate notes. Sustaining climate action after the climate justice revival. To me, justice is about reconciliation. Love is at the center of it. It's about reconciliation with the interdependent web of life of which we are a part. And I think as a congregation, we can have a lot of fun with that, among other positive emotions. The future can be created. That's my assertion. But I think it's going to take some organizing among other activities, like voting. Organizing that we're doing with our ministry with Faith in Action Nevada. And we are meeting at noon today. You can stop by if you want to learn more about that. I think some of these organizing tactics can lend itself to a deeper level of connection within our community. To conclude, I'll share a line of poetry from one of my favorite poets, American poet Walt Whitman. I speak the password primeval. I give the sign democracy. I love how he goes in, then he projects out. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Well, now's the time of our service when we greet one another in any way that feels comfortable for you, a hug, a handshake, or just a fist bump. If you're uncomfortable with any of that, just put your hands over your heart. And I'll ring the singing bell or bowl when it's time to return to your seat. So let's say hi to each other.
Good morning. My name is Chris Pecars, and my preferred pronouns are he, his, him. I am pleased to be serving as your worship leader today. Heritage and inheritance both share the same linguistic roots. While inheritance generally refers to the transfer of physical property from one person to another, heritage usually refers to the more abstract ideas, such as culture, tradition, and our family and community bonds that are passed down sometimes over generations. Still, I like to think of heritage as our inheritance from our past and our history. One of my strongest connections to Unitarian Universalism is to one of our 4 core principles, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Maybe that connection has its roots in my undergraduate education in philosophy, or maybe that connection comes from my love of history. Regardless, I've been looking for the truth in things for the most of my life, and here, in this religious tradition, we hold seeking truth with high esteem. I've come to believe that our heritage, the culture and traditions on which we build our self-image, is created on the foundation of history, both individual and collective. But our cultures and traditions are malleable, subject to poor memories, distortions, mistakes, some of it intentional, some of it simply the result of human error. I hope to show in my reflection that while some distortion or even outright storytelling can enliven our heritage, too much can be damaging, especially if the truth is twisted to fit a specific narrative. Much like building a house on a poor foundation can result in that house's collapse, building the story of our heritage on a foundation of falsehood or outright storytelling reduces our opportunities for growth and enlightenment. And now I'd ask Dave to help me light our chalice. Today's chalice lighting words were written by the Reverend Karen G. Johnston. As we gather this morning, let us be a people of not forgetting. Let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into that enormous void that sucks at and corrodes any future we hold dear. Let us practice honoring truth-telling, up from the past that must come fully into the now. Lest we falter and fail, lest the whole remain in pieces. Let not our needs for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon, smother the heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us practice resilience with reckoning. Let us marry promise and memory. Let us dance in the tension we find there. Let us rest in the integrity we cultivate there. Let us be partners with the possibilities that emerge there. It is good that we gather. And now, please rise as you are willing and able, and join us in singing hymn number 1051, We Are. Introducing our guest singer.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust, of all visions, of love, lovers of love. We are lovers and love, builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the birth of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dusk and the queens of honor, the sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations, seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
This is a story of the dirty basin. Once upon a time, there lived a prince named Siddhartha, who had a son, Rahula. Although born a prince, Siddhartha realized that in life, no one can escape old age, sickness, death, and rebirth. One day he decided to leave the comforts of the royal palace and renounced his royal heritage. He was determined to go on a quest seeking the answers to transcend life and death. After years of meditation, he was awakened and realized the natural laws of the universe. From then on, he was referred to as Sakyamuni, Buddha, or simply the Buddha. After Prince Siddhartha became the Buddha, his son Rahula followed in his footsteps and became a novice monk. As a teenager, Rahula still had mischievous and playful ways and habits. And also as a teenager, such naughty habits were proving difficult to remedy. Living in a rather strict environment of the monastery, there were no games or amusements to keep Rahula entertained, so he often came up with distractions and amusements on his own. One of his favorite games was to pass the time, and whenever people asked Rahula where the Buddha was, he would always take a chance to make fun of them by lying to them. For example, if the Buddha was in the forest practicing, he would always say that the Buddha was meditating by the river. If the Buddha was at the monastery instructing disciples, Rahula would point in the opposite direction and tell people the Buddha had gone into town to propagate the Dharma. He took joy in seeing people going everywhere looking for the Buddha. And since they were looking in all the wrong places, they would never find the Buddha. Rahula would laugh at them and think they were stupid and silly. This was how he kept himself entertained. Well, after the Buddha heard about Rahula's mischief, he thought of a way to teach him a lesson. One day, the Buddha asked for Rahula to fill a basin with water so that he could wash his feet. Well, after washing his feet, the Buddha said to him, "Rahula, now you take this water and drink it." Oh, Rahula replied, "Well, this water is dirty. Now, after it was used to wash your feet, it's undrinkable." The Buddha then said, "Rahula, your words are as dirty as this water. No one can bear to hear them." Rahula was ashamed and quickly took the basin outside and threw out the dirty water. When he returned, the Buddha said to him, "Now, take the basin and put rice in it. Rahula frowned and replied, well, the basin was just used to wash feet. It's still dirty. We cannot put food in it. The Buddha said, Rahula, your mind is just like this dirty basin. No matter how good the Dharma is, none of it can enter your mind. The Buddha took the basin and he suddenly kicked it, and the basin struck the wall and broke into pieces. And the Buddha then asked, Rahula, would you treasure a broken basin? Rahula said, Buddha, a dirty basin used to wash feet is nearly worthless, and it's of little value. Even if it's broken, it doesn't really matter. The Buddha replied, your attitude is just like this basin. Your words and lies are not valued and appreciated by people, and your mind is not ready to receive the Dharma. If you don't change, no one will respect you, and eventually, no one will care for you. Rahula, upon hearing the Buddha's teaching, burst into tears and said, I'm sorry. I promise I'll never lie again. From now on, I will focus on my practice. After that day, Rahula left behind his mischievous ways and diligently practiced, and he too eventually became awakened. He was then known as the foremost amongst all of the Buddha's disciples for his eagerness for learning.
Now is our time for prayers and meditation. I have a sorrow to share. Kathy Larson's mother passed away a few days ago. May she be remembered. May we hold her in our hearts, and may we pray for a quick recovery for Kathy from her loss. Chris Needlam would like to raise up a joy for family fellowship, the joy of the wonderful families that we see coming to UUFNN today. Take a deep breath. Stretch out your neck, your shoulders, your back. Take out your arms. Do whatever you need to do to settle comfortably in your chair. Relax and feel your connection to the earth below you. Today's meditation I took from the poet Remember, written by Joy Harlow, who was the first Native American poet laureate of the United States. Remember. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember, you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember, language comes from this. Remember, the dance language is that life is. Remember. And now let's just take a moment of silence. Thank you, and blessings be.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today, which binds our hearts and points us on our meaning. We would be one and point us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service with love and justice. Strive to make us free.
Each of us has a personal heritage that usually starts with our ancestry, where we came from. I'm descended from Polish and Irish stock, with all of my great-grandparents immigrating to the United States around the same time, the late 1800s to the early 1900s. Family lore said that my father and mother were the first to break from marrying outside of Polish or Irish families, and sure enough, when I took the 23andMe DNA test, I'm almost exactly 50-50 of Eastern European and English-Irish genetic stock, with just a touch of Northern France. My family name, Piekarz, is Polish. Our pronunciation is anglicized now, but it's pronounced Piekasz in Polish, and it translates as baker. A friend of mine who went to Warsaw delighted in sending me pictures of all the bakeries labeled Piekarz, and insisted that my family owned a goodly portion of the city. My first career was as a cook, and I've sometimes wondered if my love of cooking comes from prior generations of Piekarzes. When I was growing up, my grandmother still spoke Polish, and we called her Bachi. My aunt was Chachi Carol. Both my grandmother and aunt maintained some Polish traditions. For example, at Christmas, we ate pierogies and had kruszki, a fried bow-tied shaped cookie. They kind of taste like nothing, but they taste like family to me. I've not done much research into my family tree, but like many of you, we have some typical family rumors. Supposedly, there's a long-lost great uncle, perhaps lost because he fled a violent past, and supposedly we may be descended from Polish nobility. I have no idea about the uncle. He's remained long lost, but the nobility part might actually be true. Unfortunately, it's not some great nobility like being related to Henry VIII or a Russian Tsar. Nobility was widespread in medieval Poland. It basically meant that you own land and usually not much else. The true royalty in other countries used to mock Poland's noble class, stating that only maybe 1 in 100 had money, but the rest were just as poor as serfs. These are the kinds of truths or half-truths or even outright embellishment that enliven my heritage, and I'm sure enliven much of yours, and I don't really see much harm in them. But truth, specifically historical truth, becomes much more important when we consider our larger shared heritage. One of the biggest examples I can think of is when I consider why this historical truth matters is the history of the Civil War in the United States. The true cause of the Civil War, especially around the issue of slavery, even today colors and distorts our shared heritage as Americans. But to be clear, the slaveholding states absolutely seceded from the Union over the issue of slavery. The secession statement for Mississippi couldn't be more direct about the issue. And I quote, "Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world, and a blow at slavery is a blow at commerce and civilization. That blow has long been aimed at the institution and was at the point of reaching its consummation. There was no choice left to us but submission to the mandates of abolition or a dissolution of the Union, whose principles has been subverted to work out our ruin. The hostility to this institution has grown until it denies the right of property in slaves and refuses protection to that right on the high seas, in the territories, and wherever the government of the United States has jurisdiction. It refuses the admission of new slave states into the Union and seeks to extinguish it by confining it within its present limits, denying the power of expansion. It has nullified the fugitive slave law in almost every free state in the Union and has utterly broken the compact which our fathers pledged their faith to maintain. It advocates Negro equality, both socially and politically, and will promote insurrection and incendiarism in our midst," end quote. Immediately after the Civil War, the Southern states began to rework this narrative to claim the war was around states' rights, and they also began propagating a myth called the Lost Cause, a part of which was that slavery had been mischaracterized by the Northern states. Edward Pollard first coined the phrase Lost Cause in a book of the same title published in 1866. In the book's opening, he states, and I quote, "We shall not enter upon the discussion of the moral question of slavery, but we may suggest a doubt here whether that odious term slavery, which has been so long imposed by the exaggeration of Northern writers upon the judgment and sympathies of the world, is properly applied to the system of servitude that existed in the South, which was really the mildest in the world, which did not rest on acts of debasement and disenfranchisement, but elevated the African and was in the interest of human improvement, and which, by the law of the land, protected the Negro in life and limb and in many personal rights, and by the practice of the system bestowed upon him a sum of individual indulgences, which made him altogether the most striking type in the world of cheerfulness and contentment," end quote. The retelling of the roots of the Civil War and of the institution of slavery built a new history of the South. It gave us the image of the Southern gentleman and his perfumed Southern belle, the noble soldier in gray, defending hearth and home, guided by generals of great esteem, all in front of the beautiful plantation house on the hill, with a steamboat chugging by in the river. That alternate heritage also allowed the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the Jim Crow era, and segregation. That heritage lingers today, and it helps explain why people still fly the Confederate battle banner, sing Dixie, and creates controversy around the 1619 movement, the renaming of military bases named after Southern generals, and the resistance to removing Civil War monuments. People become rooted to their heritage, and they find justice for defending that heritage, even when confronted by the fact that it's based partially on myth and storytelling. People want to believe in the good story, not the difficult and messy one. Unfortunately, this creates obstacles to moving forward as a justice-seeking people. It's all the more difficult to discuss a topic such as affirmative action or restitution if half the country doesn't agree on the original injustice. This is also part of why white privilege and other systemic inequities continue to exist and thrive. A further complication to this historical myth building is that history is malleable. While we tend to think of history as done, it is in fact a living thing that can be altered. For example, imagine finding the classic dusty box in a corner of your grandfather's attic. Inside it are letters from Lewis and Clark of Lewis and Clark fame, declaring that Lewis was beginning to hate Clark. In fact, just like last week, Clark deliberately washed Lewis's shirts with a pair of long johns, and now all of Lewis's shirts are pink. Assuming these hypothetical letters were authentic, they would somewhat rewrite the Lewis and Clark narrative. Along those lines, my wife and I enjoy watching Finding Your Roots on PBS, hosted by the historian Henry Louis Gates Jr. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with the show, Gates interviews 2 or 3 celebrities each episode and uncovers as much of their family tree as he and his researchers can discover. Not surprisingly, it makes for good television when he finds things that people didn't know about their past or the mistakes or myths that were made as part of their family lore. That their history and heritage is remade based on new information is part of the show's charm. Unfortunately, the malleability of historical truth is ongoing and insidious. Just a couple of years ago, the Organization of American Historians and the American Historical Association, which I'll refer to as the AHA, submitted an amicus curiae brief to the U.S. Supreme Court, it's a friend of the court brief, presenting the relevant history to the Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization case. And by the way, this is something that AHA routinely does, providing historical context for the Supreme Court's decisions. In that brief, the AHA outlined the history and traditions of reproductive care in the United States, in particular the rights women had to abortion in colonial and early America. They specifically addressed their brief to the conservative justices on the court, most of which professed to be originalists and who believed that the law should be addressed through the lens of the history and traditions of America and not through a more modern worldview. The AHA noted that women had broad access to abortive treatment until what was termed quickening, the point where the mother could feel fetal movement. Prior to quickening, it was understood that the mother's health and well-being had priority over fetal life. This was well understood and documented under both common law and legal statutes until around 1857, when a doctor named Horatio Storer began to lobby the nascent American Medical Association to oppose abortion. Storer's argument had nothing to do with morality or with the medical treatment of women. His argument was nativist, that abortion was being used by Protestants to keep their families small, and that Catholic immigrants would soon overwhelm the true Protestant American citizens. His campaign mostly failed, and it wasn't until the 1900s that abortion laws became more widely spread and abortion more widely limited. But this was primarily in response to sensationalist journalism and public opinion that women were being harmed by abortions performed by non-physicians. In the majority opinion for Dobbs, Justice Alito used the word history 61 times, repeatedly misstating the historical facts as presented by the AHA in their amicus brief. The AHA was so alarmed by this that they issued a rare public rebuke of the opinion. In part, the rebuke reads as follows, quote, "We are dismayed that the court declined to take seriously the historical claims of our brief. Instead, the court adopted a flawed interpretation of abortion criminalization that has been pressed by anti-abortion advocates for more than 30 years. In so doing, the court denies the strong presence in U.S. history and traditions, at least from the Revolution to the Civil War, of a woman's ability to terminate pregnancy before the 3rd to 4th month without intervention by the state." They finished their rebuke with the following: "These misrepresentations are now enshrined in a text that becomes authoritative for legal references and citation in the future. The court's decision erodes fundamental rights and has the potential to exacerbate historical injustices and deepen inequalities in our country. We expect that historians will continue to correct the court's misinterpretation about the history of legalized abortion in the U.S. in their own research, teaching, and public speaking, while also addressing the multifaceted dilemmas presented by this decision." End quote. As I mentioned in my opening words, building the story of our heritage on a foundation of falsehood reduces our opportunities for growth and enlightenment. Furthermore, differing or alternative views of our historical truth divides our heritages into camps and is responsible for much of the discourse we see in our society today. As a nation of almost 350 million, it's impossible for every one of us to agree on everything, and it would be naive of me to think otherwise. However, our differing views are compounded and inflamed by the fact that some people would rather adhere to a false story that embraces rather than embrace a less cheery narrative, and still others deliberately ignore or change historical fact to fit their worldview. I feel that here, within Unitarian Universalism, and with our covenant to openly and freely search for truth, we have a path to building a better, more correct foundation for our heritage. But our covenant uses the word search when looking for the truth, implying it's a never-ending journey, that there is no absolute end. We need, indeed we must, search for that truth, but we also must be open to the possibility that our own interpretations might be wrong, particularly in light of new evidence or with our evolving understanding of our past and our present. Thank you all.
Well, this is a time in our service when we have the opportunity to share our bounties with each other, to continue the positive and far-reaching outreach to our fellowship and to the greater community. So a basket will be passed, and those on Zoom, please follow the instructions on the screen. You can also mail a check to the office or sign up for automatic giving. Well, one of the many things I love about this fellowship is that each month we choose a nonprofit to share our plate with. And this month, we're donating to CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates, a great organization of community volunteers who speak up for abused or neglected children. Washoe County's CASA program belongs to a network of nearly 950 programs nationwide that recruit, train, and support citizen volunteers who then advocate for the best interests of abused and neglected children in our courtrooms and communities. There are 660 children currently under care in Washoe County, but only about 100 have been assigned to CASA. So more volunteers are desperately needed, and any funding of the foundation, from the funding the foundation receives, goes directly to advertising and marketing efforts for volunteer recruitment and support. So with the ushers, please come forward. Would you join Evan and me as we bless our offerings to the work of this fellowship, which is helping more people grow in love, faith, justice, and joy? We dedicate ourselves, and these are offerings.
Wheeling around this air tank never gets old. Now it is time for us to extinguish our chalice. Please rise as you're willing or able to sing our closing hymn, number 1028, Fire of Commitment.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion seems to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by your courageous choice. When the blaze of our commitment sets our minds and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame
Please remain standing for our benediction. If you'd like, please join hands. If you'd prefer not to, you can cross your hands over your heart like so. You are blessed with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and your intellect will take you far on your journey. You have been endowed with reason and free will, and it is your calling every day to use these gifts. May you learn the complex nature of truth-telling and the ability to speak the truth with honesty, empathy, and care. May you find rest on your journey, always remembering where you came from and being mindful that your ancestors stand behind you. Our worship is over. Let our service begin. Namaste.